Welcome to a very special live edition of the Fit Frequency. I'm your host, Doug Wattenshade, owner of Delaware Fit Factory. I'm here in the lab of Delaware Fit Factory. I just want to talk about nutrition numbers. This very well could be the last podcast in fitness and nutrition that you ever need to listen to. Chances are, not so much. And I'll explain why. Because nutrition, we all know that it's usually the hardest part of your fitness and health journey, right? It's not as it is simple, but it is absolutely not easy. So the goal today is to go through really basic stuff for the average person that wants to make improvements in their health, in their fitness, and in their nutrition. Really, just going to break it down to the numbers. Had a couple conversations recently. People on very different sides of the spectrum of our gym. One person who needs to make a lifestyle change and like, hey, things are just hard outside of the gym. Like the gym is fun and things are just difficult. The other is an incredible athlete and hey, she's had a big lifestyle change recently. No longer a collegiate athlete, but struggling to figure out exactly what she should be eating and how much she should be eating. So that is where this idea came from. And if you are just listening to this, bear with me. There will be some moments where I like stop talking for a second to write stuff down because I've got the big dry erase board behind me, and I'm going to move this forward a little bit so that we can fill the screen and hopefully get rid of that terrible glare. There we go. Okay. So some things to cover before we just dive into a whole bunch of math and everything like that. Macros or macronutrients. Those are the big three that we often talk about. We often hear about. The buzzword right now is protein. There's protein in everything. There's protein in your fruity pebbles, which is garbage. So we've got carbs or carbohydrates. That is your essentially you want to think like that's what gives you energy. And then we've got our protein. Protein rebuilds the muscles that you break down. When you're working out, you get little tiny micro tears throughout all your muscles. The protein helps your body rebuild those muscles to make them stronger. And then we've got our fats. Fats are great for keeping your body moving, just like oil in your car. It keeps your organs healthy. It keeps your body working properly. So we've got our macro breakdown. Now, of those three macros, it can be kind of tricky for you to figure out, how much of each of those macros should I be eating? There's all kinds of stuff all over the internet, and I will say that all of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here, it's all widely available on the internet. Find somebody you trust. Find a source, preferably, somebody that is either higher up in the education system, so a doctor, or find a gym that has worked with hundreds of people or more, like Delaware Fit Factory. Find people that you trust to talk to about all this information. So a general macro breakdown, a very common one that is recommended for people that maybe don't have crazy goals of bodybuilding or powerlifting strength and all that kind of stuff. I just want to be generally healthy, fit, strong. I want to be my best self. A 40-30-30 breakdown. And what that is percentage of your total calories. So 40% carbs or carbohydrates, 40% protein, and 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. If my math is mathing, that is 100%. So there you go. Now, those are percentages of your total calorie intake throughout the day. So how do we find your total calorie intake? This is where the math gets crazy. I do recommend that you find some place like Delaware Fit Factory that has some sort of biometric measuring device. We have an in-body scanner. You stand on it, you hold these things, your feet are on metal pads, shoots a little tiny electrode through your body to find all kinds of cool data. One of those data pieces is the basal metabolic rate. You can also get a DEXA scan. There's a whole lot of options out there. Do I recommend a $20 thing off of Amazon? No. Find somebody that you trust. Find a professional. So basal metabolic rate, that is essentially going to be what does your body need to just exist, not gain, not lose, and just to operate without any extra work, right? So we're not talking about if you got a construction job or if you're sitting at a desk or whatever. This is just what does your body need to stay exactly the way it is, and all you're going to do is just like lay down the whole day. You're not moving at all. So we've got a wide variety of BMRs at Delaware Fit Factory. I'm just going to choose a number right in the middle. I'm going to go with 1600. You might think to yourself, wait. All the nutrition labels say 2000 calories is the average. First of all, the average is like, don't even look at that because everybody's built different. If you're looking at averages to decide what your body needs, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. Also, we're talking basal metabolic rate. So this doesn't include any daily activity. So your BMR, or for this example, the BMR is 1600 calories just to exist, just to maintain the weight that you're at. And then to find our total calories on a normal day, and that includes going to work, picking up the kids, whatever you're doing. Also, perhaps your workouts. If you're working out at Delaware Fit Factory, I'll tell you where we fit on the scale here. We need to factor in our TDEE, or our total daily energy expenditure. This is a multiplier. So I told you the math is going to get a little bit tricky. So we have our basal metabolic rate, what your body just needs. And then we're going to multiply it by something based on where you fall on the scale of daily energy expenditure. So if you have a very sedentary lifestyle, that means you get out of bed, you go to the office, you sit in your office for 8 hours a day, you go home at most, like you vacuum the house. Like, we're not even talking like you do daily walks to get your heart rate up and stuff like that. You're going to be in the sedentary category. So we're going to take your basal metabolic rate, which is BMR. We're going to multiply that by 1.2. I have my calculator somewhere around here. I'm going to do this math with you right now. So we're going to go 1600 times 1.2. And so your estimated calorie intake for the day is going to be 1,920 if you have a sedentary lifestyle. Again, that would be like, a whole lot of sitting at the office, not much intentional exercise. If we go to the next category, lightly active, this might be, maybe you go on a walk around the block, a quarter to a half mile or something every night, or you make an effort to get to the gym once a week for a 30-minute sweat session or something like that. Your multiplier is going to be 1.375. So let's go back to your BMR of 1600. We're going to multiply that by 1.375, and that is going to be 2,200 calories. So 2,200 calories for a lightly active person to maintain the weight that you're at. Now we're getting into moderately active. So the next two places on the scale, the next two steps on this TDEE scale, basically we can say like, cool, if you're coming into Delaware Fit Factory, you're doing intense workouts 2, maybe 3 times a week, you're going to fall into moderate. Or maybe you run. If you are a runner, maybe you're training for a half marathon or something like that, and you run 2 to 3 times a week, and it's a little bit more than a quarter or a half mile. If you're doing 1 to 3 miles several times a week, or 5 miles once a week, or something like that, when we're bumping up above lightly active, the multiplier then goes to 1.55. So back to our handy dandy calculator, 1600 for our BMR times 1.55, 2,480 calories. We go to the next one. Very active. This is the people, I would say these people fall in between, say, 4 and 6, maybe even 7 days a week in the gym. A lot of us at Delaware Fit Factory that are in incredible shape, that use CrossFit or strength training as maybe your outlet, maybe your therapy, maybe it's your competitive void that you're filling since you're outside of college these days. So we would fall in the very active category. So back to the calculator, 1600. The multiplier is now 1.725. 2,760 calories. Now, the last one, the last notch on the TDEE scale, extreme. I would say this should be reserved for performance athletes, professional athletes that their job is to be in the gym 2 to 3 hours per day. They're also maximizing their sleep. They've also got a little bit more of a custom macro breakdown than 40, 30, 30. These are the people that their livelihood depends on their energy expenditure, their performance, their physical feats. So that would be a multiplier of 1.9. So 3,040 calories. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking to yourself, like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm lightly active. You're telling me that all I have to do is walk around the block, which is a quarter mile loop in my neighborhood. I can do that twice a week and I can still eat 2,200 calories a day and lose weight? No, because right there, we need to factor in the next two goals, the purpose that we're doing all of this. If you want to maintain, if your BMR is 1,600 and you are a lightly active person and you want to maintain, that would be a goal for you. If you don't want to lose weight, you don't want to gain weight, 2,200. But now let's talk about our goals. So why are we paying so close attention to all the food that we're eating and whatnot? Well, if your goal is to lose weight, then we need to consider all of the numbers that we just found. And what we're going to do is subtract. Oh, no. Yeah, we're going to subtract 300 to 500 calories per day. And then if we're trying to gain weight, some of us actually do want to gain weight. We're trying to pack on some muscle. We've got to add 3 to 500 calories per day. Add 300 to 500 calories per day. Okay. So let's say we're trying to lose weight. We are a lightly active person. 2,200 calories minus, we'll say minus 300. That brings you down to 1,900 calories. So that would be the goal to aim for. If you're trying to bring down weight a little bit faster, we're going to bump it up to subtracting 500. So your deficit will be 1,700. That is just barely above what you need to survive or to maintain according to your basal metabolic rate. So a lot of ups and downs here. So we take your bare minimum if all you're going to do is lay around. Then we factor in how much you move around all day. And then we factor in your goals and how that affects your total daily energy expenditure. Now, if we're trying to gain weight, what we're going to do is take your number here. I would imagine if you're gaining weight, you're at least going to be moderately active, likely very active. So we're going to add 300 to 500 calories. We're going to bump it up to, say, it could be anywhere from 2,700 to upwards of 3,000 to 3,200, something like that, depending on your activity level. So lots of numbers here. So you have your calories that you need to consume. Cool. If that's like where we stop, you can fill 3,000 calories pretty quickly if all you're doing is eating pizza and cheeseburgers and chugging beer. I don't recommend that. Even if you're trying to gain weight and you're not doing it in a healthy manner, if that's your goal, I still don't recommend you do that. I recommend that we follow, again, the 40, 30, 30. So 40% of your total calories. I just realized I spelled subtract wrong. Let's get a C in there. Subtract. 40% of the calories that we found out through your total daily energy expenditure and factoring in your goal, 40% of those should be carbs. Those are going to be things like rice, potatoes, whole grains, fruit, all of that. 30% of that should be protein. And I'm going to recommend most of that protein be from whole foods. So staying away from supplements as much as you can, getting it from lean meats, getting it from things like lentils, um, anything where there is more protein than there is the other stuff. You've probably heard me talk about peanut butter. I love peanut butter, but that's a fat source with protein. That's not a protein source. So 30% of your calories should come from protein and then 30% from fat. I'm going to throw one more little thing in there that's going to confuse and make this even more difficult. Not all grams, when you're measuring things, not all grams are the same. Let's move our calculator here. So 1 gram of carbohydrates equals 4 calories. Cool. That's not that many calories. 1 gram of protein also equals 4 calories. Awesome. We want a lot of protein. And that's not a lot of calories. Okay. 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories, more than double that of protein or carbohydrates. This is where a lot of people get into some trouble. They don't measure, they have no idea how much oil they're using when they're cooking, or they don't realize that the protein that they're choosing, maybe it's ground beef or it's a steak, they don't realize that fat content is very, very high and very calorie dense. So, something to keep in mind. This is why I recommend that at least once a year, and if you need, if you fall off of things, very quickly, maybe just do it all the time. But measuring, tracking your food. I use an app called Macro Stacks. You can also work with Coach Pamela. She uses the Healthy Steps Nutrition Program. There's ways to track your food to see, like, okay, if I'm eating a piece of chicken breast, that's got a ton of protein, very little, very, very little fat. Shrimp, ton of protein, no fat. Now, if we go with salmon 5 days a week, great protein, high fat source. So that is going to take away a lot of your 30% of your fat calories. And then of the total calories, that's really going to spike it up. And that is sometimes how we get in trouble. We end up doing something more like, say, 40% carbs. We end up with 10% protein and whatever's left, 50% fat. So definitely something to consider when choosing how much of what to eat. So now I'm going to break this down. I'm going to choose somebody that's moderately active with a BMR of 40, 30, 30. And I'm going to use all of this math and break it down. So BMR of 1600, moderately active. So the total daily energy expenditure is 2,480. But we're trying to lose weight, so I'm going to subtract 300 from that. We'll make a little box right here. So we are at 2,180 calories. That is going to be our goal to maintain, or that is going to be the ceiling of our calories. Because remember, we want to be in a little bit of a deficit from this number here because we're trying to lose weight. So now let's figure out 40% of that needs to be carbs. So handy dandy calculator, 2,180 times 0.4, 872 calories. And then we're going to divide that by 4. And that's going to be 218 grams of carbs. Did I do that right? I think I did that right. Now let's go 30% is going to be protein. And while I'm here, I'm also going to write 30% is fat. So we'll go back 2,180 times 0.3. So 30% of that is going to be 654 calories of protein and 654 calories of fat. Now let's take 654. We're going to multiply that, or sorry, we're going to divide that by 4, and that'll give us 163.5 grams of protein. That can be a lot of protein, but you can do it. Whole foods first, and then fill in towards the end if you need to with your protein shakes. Now we're going to back up here, clear that out. 654. Now we're going to divide that by 9. Woo-wee! 72.6 grams. So we've got it all broken down for you. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is an incredibly simple, not easy, but simple way to look at your nutrition. You can break it down to the math. You can get into the weeds of the science and all that kind of stuff, like what is a complex versus a simple carb, the difference between the sugar and whatnot that's in fruit versus the readily available glucose in like pastas and grains and stuff. You can get into this kind of protein, that kind of protein, easily digestible stuff. Holy moly! Let's simplify it. The average person needs 40, 30, 30 for your macro breakdown. 40% of your calories should be carbs. 30% should be protein. 30% should be fat. If we take a basal metabolic rate and we multiply it by your total daily energy expenditure multiplier, that's how you get your total calories. For this example, we took somebody with a BMR of 1600 and we chose right down the middle, the moderately active person for the multiplier of 1.55. That's how we came up with 2,480. Now we're going to factor in their goals. They wanted to lose weight. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 300 calories from that 2,480. So that's how we get our 2,180 ceiling of how many calories you should be eating. We do the math and we find out 872 calories of that should be carbs. 654 of that should be protein. 654 should be fat. And we need to be careful when we're tracking those because the grams are different depending on the macro. So remember, 1 gram of carbohydrates equals 4 calories. So for 872, we're going to have 218 grams of carbohydrates throughout the day. Protein is also 4 calories per gram. That's going to be 163.5 grams for your 654 total calories. And then fat is more than double of the other two macronutrients, 9 calories per gram of fat. That comes to 72.6 grams for your 654 calories there. This is a lot. Some of us are data-driven people. I am a data-driven person. That's how I'm able to use macro stacks. I eat the same type of thing every single day. A lot of my lifts, I know the percentages and I hit them and, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm on the outskirts, right? I work at a gym. I own a gym. I manage a group of people who coach at the gym. So it just makes sense that this type of stuff is just part of my lifestyle. It's not the same for everybody. If you could be a dentist, you could be an office worker, you could be a stay-at-home parent. That's probably one of the hardest jobs in the world. So being a fitness or health or nutrition or exercise professional is not really your job. So if you struggle with this, that's okay. That's what I'm getting at. That is why, way down here in the bottom, I wrote it down so I didn't forget. That is why it's important to trust your coaches, to find somebody to hold you accountable. We've got an amazing team here at Delaware Fit Factory that can help hold you accountable to your workouts. If you're very data driven like me and you need some help tracking all this stuff, come talk to me. I'll hook you up with some macro stack stuff. If you need help building habits to help you hit all of these other things, maybe you're not a big numbers person. Maybe you're struggling with fats late in the evenings. Coach Pamela is going to help you build some habits so that you don't fall into the trap of eating a jar of peanut butter every single night. She helped me get out of that trap. She can help you get out of whatever trap you're in and help you build healthy habits so that these numbers kind of like fix themselves as you build healthy and sustainable habits around your nutrition and your fitness. If you've got any questions at all about this stuff, we love talking about this. If you can't tell, like, we nerd out quite a bit. So find the team at Delaware Fit Factory. You can find us on social media, so Instagram and Facebook at Delaware Fit Factory. You can go to our website. There's a contact us form. You can email us, info@delawarefitfactory.com. Send us any questions, or if it's maybe not nutrition related. I love talking about stuff on this podcast and Instagram reels and all that kind of stuff. Send us any questions that you have. Let us know how we can help you. Not everything's transactional. We love helping people. That's why this podcast is free. That's why the YouTube channel is free. That's why we post helpful stuff and not just silly memes and whatnot all over the internet. So if you need help, if you got a request, or maybe you just want to hear from somebody, if you've got an interview request, please let us know in the comments or find us on social media or email us info@delawarefitfactory.com. There's a very long episode, simple, not easy. Hopefully some of you, this is the last nutrition podcast you ever need. Hopefully you were taking some notes, not driving, of course, but hopefully you're able to take some notes and jot stuff down and make some improvements. And if not, reach out. Let us know how we can help. If you got some value out of this episode, please share it with a friend. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, review, all those things that everybody tells you to do on the internet. And until next time, make sure that you continue to eat better, sleep better, and train better so that you can be better every day. Catch you in the next one.